First of all, congratulations. The fact that you've clicked on this video means that you've got an interview coming up or you think you're about to get one pretty soon. My name is Hirst and I was the global CEO of $1 billion business with over 10,000 employees. And through my career, I must have interviewed hundreds of people. And the fact that you've taken the time to watch this interview means that you're already ahead of most people, because success in life really is 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. Nearly every recruitment process works in pretty well the same way. They all have basically two stages. They have the application, resume, cover letter stage. That's the stage that presumably you've already done and been successful at, so congratulations. And then they have the second stage, the stage we're going to talk about in this video, and that is the interview stage. Nearly every process works in that way. And though nearly every recruitment process works in the same way, the two halves actually operate very differently. And this is an important first thing for you to understand. For nearly every job, there are far more applicants than there are places. So the first half of the process, the application stage, that process for most employers is primarily about rejecting people. They need to get the number of applicants down to a short enough list that they can actually begin to meet them. So the first stage, and the stage that you've presumably been successful at, is about finding people to remove from the list. Put bluntly, it's about rejections. And the second stage is about selection. And the fact that you're meeting them means that they really want to hire you. They are going to invest significant amounts of time now finding that right candidate. So first stage, it's about shortening the list. Second stage, it's about meeting people who they really, really want to hire. So let's get into my 6-step process, which means that when you get into the room, you're absolutely gonna crush it. The most important thing when you walk into an interview room is to remember that the reason you're there, the reason they are investing all of that time is because they really do think you could well be the answer. They've looked at your resume and your cover letter and they've concluded that you've got the skills and the experience that they need. So you've done the hard part in many ways. They've got a problem, which is they need to hire somebody, and you could well be the solution. So if the interview goes well, that doesn't just mean that you've had a good day, that means that they've had a good day as well. And when we look at the two stages of the recruitment process, I really do think the first stage, the application stage, is a bit of a lottery. For a lot of jobs, there are many more applicants than there are places, which is why an aspect of success in that part of the process is just applying to lots of places. However, interviews really aren't a lottery. By preparing and practicing, you can significantly improve your chances of success, not least because they are a competitive event. You are competing against other people for that job or those jobs. And what you have to remember is that many of those other applicants just don't prepare very thoroughly and very well. So just the fact that you're here right now puts you ahead of so many of the other people that they are going to be meeting. That fact alone should make you walk a little bit taller, have your back a little bit straighter, and give you a whole lot more confidence. 2, understanding the process. Interviews are almost never a one-off event. Almost every job you go for will involve at least 2, often many more than 2 interviews. Now, in my opinion, when that becomes 4, 5, 6 interviews, I think that's crazy. That's a waste of everybody's time. Honestly, employers just need to get their finger out and make a decision. But nevertheless, you can't decide the process and you have to accept that that might be how it goes. In many situations, the first interview interview could well be quite different to the others. That actually might be a filtering stage as well, and it's possible that they will whittle down the shortlist after that first interview. And I'll come back and talk about that in just a second. However, it is also very common that there is no apparent pattern through the interview process. They just ask you to meet lots of different people. Sometimes that will be on different days. Sometimes, for example, in a graduate recruitment situation, you might meet 4 or 5 or 6 people all on the same day. And in which case you may well have quite different interview experiences, but that's because you're meeting different people with different interviewing styles. Now, I'll just say one quick word on interviewers. I'm afraid to tell you that the sad truth is a great many people aren't very good at interviewing people, which means that you might have quite a random process through the people that you meet. And in fact, I'm going to post a video on how to be a good interviewer in a few weeks' time, because the reality of it is that a great many people interview candidates through their career, and indeed that might be something that you've already done or may come on and do. So if the first interview is a filtering stage, the chances are you're going to meet somebody from the HR department, for example, not a person who you will be working with or a person who will be your boss. What that means is that that person is likely to not be a subject matter expert on the thing that you are being interviewed for, which means that they will often be working off a checklist. They will be looking for certain messages, signals, and signs to help them understand that, firstly, you're the person that you claimed to be on your application form, and second of all, that you meet some predetermined criteria so that they can pass you through to the next stage. Now, this box ticking is going to be fairly generic, however, and they are quite similar irrespective of the job you're going for. They are certain to ask you questions with regard to your CV, so be prepared to talk about your skills and your experience. And also they'll be looking for attitudinal markers. Are you on time? Are you presentable? Are you likable? Are you somebody who they think is going to fit in the culture? And most importantly, are they somebody that if they pass you through to the next stage, the people that you meet subsequently are going to be pretty happy to spend an hour with you. That said, all the things I'm going to talk about in the second half of this video are perfectly applicable to that first stage interview as well. And if you do a good job of preparation and practice, which I'm going to come on and talk about, you will absolutely smash that first interview, just like you will all of the others. Finally, in this section, I want to talk about aptitude and attitude. All of us, when we apply for any job, are really just a mix of aptitude and attitude. Aptitude is the skills that we've gained through our education or our career to date, and they are typically the things that we'll have talked about on our resume. And attitude is who we are as a person. And one way of thinking about the interview process is, yeah, they're gonna check in a bit to make sure that you have got the skills you claimed, but really, interview processes are about attitude. Interview processes for the vast majority of jobs are not focused on skills. They are focused on understanding the sort of person you are, understanding whether or not you're going to be somebody who becomes a great employee, and I guess somebody who they just all want to spend time with and work with. So when you think about interviews and you think about the recruitment process, think, generally speaking, first half aptitude, second half interviews, attitude. Now, when it comes to attitude, very often you'll hear people talk about fit. And people say to me, well, yeah, but how do I know whether I'm going to fit into a company if I've never been in that company? And on the face of it, that seems like a reasonable enough question. But the reality of it is that nearly all employers are looking for the same kind of characteristics. They are looking for people who are personable, people who are great team members, people who work hard, people who are resilient, people who are good problem solvers, people who are honest and that they trust. And these are really the things that you need to convince an interviewer of. And you know what? They're not that surprising. And in some ways, they're not that difficult to do because they're just the things that we would like in our friends or our colleagues as well. And nor should we be surprised that most companies have these same characteristics in common, because guess what? Companies are just collections of people. So if you're enjoying this video, please remember to like and subscribe for tons more useful and powerful career-changing content. Number 3, research. In some ways, I think this is the easiest part of the entire recruitment process and also the most powerful. It is the most useful to you if you do it. Remember, the recruitment process is competitive. There are nearly always more applicants than there are jobs. So what you're looking to do is you're trying to give yourself a competitive advantage. And in my experience, the vast majority of people really don't do much research. They kind of have a quick look on LinkedIn maybe, but they don't spend the time to really try and get under the hood of the business. And for the people that do, this really pays off. And like I say, it's easier to do than ever. The first and most obvious place to start is with the job description. Honestly, if you've got to this point in the process and they haven't given you a job description, if you ask for it, they're likely to be actually a bit embarrassed, and they're certainly going to give you one. So make sure you get it, because the job description is your key starting point, your map, if you like, to the interview or interviews that you're about to have. So you need to get the job description and then go through it quite carefully, because what you want to do as you prepare for the interview and when you're actually in the interview is play as much of that back to them as you can. Look for the key points of emphasis. Understand what those are, remember what those are, work those into your answers to your questions, and we're going to talk about preparation for questions in a moment, and play it back to them. One of the most powerful ways to do that is to give the person what they want, and the job description tells you what they want. You should also use LinkedIn. If you haven't got a LinkedIn profile, make sure you've got one, set it up, make sure it looks professional, and you should look up the people that you're going to be meeting. If people have a premium subscription, they'll be able to see that you've looked at their profile, but that's fine. That actually reflects quite well on you because that shows you're doing your homework. I wouldn't, however, message them in advance. I just think that's a bit creepy and weird. But LinkedIn will tell you a lot about them, and you might even do a bit of research on other key executives or the person you're meeting's peers, etc., etc. It can tell you quite a lot about the company. Thirdly, you should also do what I think of as kind of open source research. You should look at the company's website. That'll tell you a lot about how the business is doing. It'll tell you about their culture. It'll tell you about their products. It might tell you about what they're planning to do on the future. If it's a big company, the annual report will be on the website as well. I'm not suggesting you have to read all of the financial information unless you're going to work in a finance department, but there will always be a statement at the start by the CEO or the chairman that will tell you about the company's ambitions, and you can learn an awful lot from that, which again, you can play back to the people that you meet. You should also do research amongst their competitors, look at what other people in the sector are doing, and virtually every sector has its fair share of trade magazines, and you can spend a little bit of time going through those, just getting a flavor for not just the company that you're going to meet, but what are the big trends, what are the big challenges for the sector that you're going to go and work in. The fourth thing that you should definitely do is look at Glassdoor. First of all, Glassdoor will just give you a flavor of how people talk about that company. I have to say I would take it with a pinch of salt, but I think it's a very useful thing to do. However, there is one specific area you should definitely look at, and that is the interview section. For a lot of big companies, there will be a section on their Glassdoor profile that will tell you about the experiences other people have had when they've gone for interviews there. Sometimes that'll be useful, sometimes it might not, but it won't take very long and you might just get a couple of great nuggets. You might even get super lucky and somebody who you're about to meet might be referenced in that section, so it's well worth the time. Now, the final piece in this section is a little bit of a watch out, and that is internal referrals. I have seen people elsewhere on social media suggest that one of the things you should do is hunt around on LinkedIn within the company and find people within the organization that you might have a connection to. For example, people you went to the same school as, or people you went to the same university as, or perhaps people that you have some common interest, members of the same club, for example, and send them a direct message asking them for some advice or some help. Now, I think this is an absolutely terrible idea, and I would strongly advise you not to do that under any circumstances. In many companies these days, that kind of thing is really frowned upon. And if I put myself in the position of an employee of a big company and I get a totally out of the blue message from somebody I've never met who happened to go to the same university as me and say, hey, I'm coming for an interview, can you help? I'd think that was super weird. And I'll be honest, if I was interviewing somebody who I found out had done that, I'd really take a pretty dim view of it. So do not do that, in my opinion. However, if there's somebody in the company that you actually do know, somebody that you've worked with before or who's a friend, of course you should ask that person for any help or advice. That's not weird at all. It is weird asking total strangers, so do not do it. Number 4 is preparation. And really, preparation is the pulling together of all the stuff that we've covered so far and packaging it in a way that is useful for you when you're in the interview. And in reality, of course, what that means is packaging it in a way that you can use it to answer whatever questions you're asked most effectively. Now, you can never fully predict what questions you're going to be asked. And as I said earlier on, you might well meet a quite random and eclectic group of people who honestly might ask you some questions that you think, blimey, I've no idea why they asked me that. But nevertheless, with a bit of homework, you can prepare very, very effectively for pretty well any question and any situation that occurs when you're actually in that interview. And you know what? The good news is it's actually pretty easy to do, and it is so important, and if you do it well and thoroughly, incredibly powerful. Properly preparing answers for typical questions that you might get asked is the single most useful and powerful thing you can do when preparing for an interview. And at the start, I talked about confidence, and one of the best ways and most powerful ways that we can build our confidence is by preparing properly. The more we prepare, the more confident we will feel. And the more confident we feel, the less chance there is that our brain will suddenly melt down 10 minutes into the conversation. And the other important thing to remember about interview questions is they are not really looking for right and wrong answers. The whole point of the process is to get to know you, is to understand you a bit better. And if you go back to that point I made earlier about aptitude and attitude, the real point of the questions is to understand the attitude part of who you are. Which means that sometimes, you know what? It's not just okay to say, I don't know. It can be quite powerful to say, I don't know. Because of course, none of us know everything. And I always think if I meet somebody who has the confidence on occasion to say, do you know what? I don't know, or I hadn't thought of that. But because I prepared properly, here is something that I can talk about, or here is something that I can share with you that is relevant. That's a great place to be. So although preparation won't give you all the answers, it gives you the confidence to cover all the bases. So obviously you can never predict all of the questions that you're going to get asked in an interview. And honestly, some interviewers deliberately throw you curveballs just to see how you're gonna respond. But what you definitely can do, and what you 100% must do, is you can prepare for the stone cold classics. And I'm gonna share with you in a minute my 10 stone cold classic interview questions that you must prepare answers to. But before I do that, I'm gonna tell you how I think you should do that preparation. You should get the questions and you should write out for each question what your answer is. And I mean write out. Don't just look at it and think about it, write it out. Because when you write something down, it sticks in your head. And I would get those little cards you used, perhaps when you used to revise, if you remember that, get those cards, write the question on one side, write the answer on the other, and just do it repetitively. If you do it that way, you can get those answers embedded in your brain, make it like muscle memory. And if you do it that way, you can do it very quickly in your free time, on the bus, on the commute, whatever it is. But write the answers down and practice saying them out loud. So here are my 10 stone cold classic interview questions. You can screenshot them, and remember, when you're preparing your answers, the objective is to tell them what they want to hear, and or make sure you're landing the points that you really want them to understand about you. So here we go. Number 1, tell me about yourself. Number 2, what are your greatest strengths? Number 3, what are your greatest weaknesses? Number 4, why do you want to come and work here? Number 5, tell me about a time that you faced a challenge at work and how did you handle it? Number 6, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Number 7, describe a time you worked brilliantly in a team. Number 8, why are you leaving your current job? Number 9, how do you prioritize your work? And number 10, that old chestnut, do you have any questions for us? Which I'm going to come to in the next section. Number 5, practice. Now, you might think that practicing interviews is really quite difficult, and if not difficult, quite awkward. But I'm going to share with you a really simple, not awkward, and effective way of doing just that. The easiest way to practice interviews is, once you've written down the questions and your answers on the pieces of card or the pieces of paper, as we discussed in the previous section, find a friend or a colleague, sit opposite them, doesn't have to be particularly formal, you could sit next to them, you could go for coffee with them, give them the questions and just get them to ask you them, a bit like you would if you were revising for an exam. You don't have to replicate, and in fact, I think it's very hard to replicate an interview. And in fact, you don't get much extra benefit from doing that, because no matter how hard you try, you're not really going to be able to replicate the exact situation you're going to find. Certainly not going to be able to do that in most people's everyday lives and without an awful lot of effort. But what you can do is you can practice responding to the questions with another person present, which always feels very different to when you do it on your own. And this is something we can all do. We can all do it with a friend, with a partner, with a colleague, over a coffee, and you'll be amazed at the difference it makes when you're saying the questions out loud. And if you like, and the other person's happy to do this, they might just ask you some spontaneous follow-up questions as well, which helps you just think a little bit more on your feet, which helps you get used to following where the conversation goes, and of course, maybe also helps you get it back onto the topics that you want to talk about. So this is a really simple, really straightforward technique that everybody can do, and I guarantee it's great for the mental muscle memory. Now, of course, if you know somebody who's an experienced or practiced interviewer, then you may well be able to do it in a more formal way. But like I said, there are many people that do interviews, but there really aren't many people who are very good interviewers. So I would suggest my technique is as reliable as any. Now, let's come to that famous final interview question that nearly everybody asks, and it's just one that you have to have an answer to. Honestly, I've interviewed hundreds of people. I always ask them this question. Everybody always gives me an answer, and it almost never adds very much to what's gone before, but nevertheless, it's one you have to prepare. If only so it shows you've thought about it in advance. So here we go. Here's my 10 top answers to the "Have you got any questions for us?" Question 1. Can you describe the day-to-day responsibilities for this role? Number 2. How would you describe the team culture and the overall work environment? Number 3. What qualities or skills are you most looking for in this role? Number 4. What are the key challenges that this department or team faces at the moment? Number 5, how do you measure success in this position, and what are you looking to achieve over the next 6 months? Number 6, what's a typical career path for somebody in this role? Number 7, how does the company support professional development and learning? Number 8, can you tell me a little bit more about the team I'll be working with? Number 9, what are the company's primary goals in the coming year, and how will this role contribute towards them? And number 10, quite a brave one, but I like it. Is there anything about my background that gives you pause? So there you go, top 10 answers to the "Have you got any questions for me?" conundrum. Like I said, I have never learned anything that I can remember about a candidate from asking them that question. But at the same time, if ever I've met a candidate and they haven't asked me it, I felt a little bit surprised. So it's an easy one to prepare, have 3 or 4 in your back pocket. So number 6, I've called hygiene, and you've already thought I definitely don't need this section, and I'm 100% certain that you don't. However, I am including it because every watch out that I'm about to share with you, I have seen somebody do. So if you've got 2 more minutes, it's worth hanging around. So here are my 7 absolute watch out no-nos. If you do any one of these 7, the chances are you're out straight away. They may not tell you, but you'll find out soon enough. Number 1, the most obvious, be on time. It is better to be an hour early than it is to be 1 minute late. That said, I'd say the ideal sweet spot is be about 15 minutes early. If you are going to be late and you have a really good reason, absolutely make sure that you tell them that you're going to be late and you tell them why. Relative it is, if you've got a good reason, most employers, every employer at this stage is going to be totally understanding. But if you just turn up late because you cock up, you're out. Number 2, dress. I get asked this quite a lot. I'm not going to tell you how to dress. You should dress appropriate to the role you're going for. And if you're not sure how people dress in the role you're going for, it's pretty easy to Google and find out. However, there is 2 rules of thumb that I will share with you. If in doubt, dress smart. You're never going to not get a job because you've dressed too smart, but you might well not get a job because you didn't dress smart enough. And second of all, the best way to try and judge it is to dress 1 level smarter than most of the employees look when they go to work. But beyond that, again, if you don't know the answer, research is king. Number 3, an absolute interview killer. And I tell you, of the 7 things on my hygiene list, this is probably the most common mistake I see people make. And that is, do not bitch about or badmouth your current employer. If you're in a group environment, any of the other candidates that you've met, and absolutely never say anything other than extremely complimentary things about anybody who's previously interviewed you in that process, irrespective of what the interviewer might say. I've seen people do it, and when they do, honestly, you're off the list. Don't chew gum. Don't lie. If you don't know the answer to the question, it is far, far better. In fact, as established, it can be quite powerful to say, I don't know, rather than to make up a lie. White lies are okay, but anything bigger than that, you stand a chance of being found out. And again, you'll be off the list. Number 6, put your phone on silent. If you don't have your phone on silent and it rings, it's not the end of the world, but do not answer it other than, I suppose, maybe to say, I'll call you back. And the final one, the easiest, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is clean hands, clean nails, clean clothes, clean hair. So that's it. There's no great mystery to the interview process. If you've got an interview, that's because they want to hire you. And people that succeed in interviews are always the people that have prepared better. So if you follow these steps and put a little bit of effort in, it really doesn't require that much, then you are gonna absolutely smash it. So thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed and found this useful, please remember to hit like and subscribe for tons more career-changing advice. Thanks.